Fallout 4 is a controversial game. As with any series, games change and evolve over time. In the case of Fallout, they went from isometric CRPGs to first-person RPG shooter hybrids. As each entry came out, the deep and occasionally convoluted RPG roots gave way for more streamlined gameplay. This is where most people have complaints about the series. Fallout 1 and 2 may be similar, but 3 was a huge jump compared to the past entries. Likewise, Fallout 3 and New Vegas have many similarities, but 4 is a largely different game. That brings with it countless pros and cons. But despite all the contention among fans of the series, I constantly find myself coming back to Fallout 4. Sure, it's not perfect, and other entries have done various things better, but it's still one of my favorite games to this very day. But arguing about the best Fallout game isn't the point of this video. As you can already tell, we're all here to see a Fallout 4 run. As the title states, we're going to be shooting first and asking questions later. And let me tell you, that is far from a simple task. The rules of this run are pretty straightforward. I can't talk to anyone without shooting them first. And I'm not just talking about an accidental shot that NPCs will forgive. No, I need to try to fully empty the health bar of anyone I would otherwise have a conversation with. Now, obviously this doesn't apply to the introduction before the bombs drop, because you have no weapons and you're forced to talk to NPCs to continue. But once the game actually starts, the rules are in full effect. I started things off by button mashing my way through the intro. No time for creating a character or listening to NPCs, even though this wasn't actually a speedrun. I tried denying the Vault Tech sales pitch numerous times until my wife stepped in to push the story along. Next up, it was time to pick my stats. I went with max intelligence for quicker leveling, max endurance for more health and sprint time, and put the remaining points in perception for a little more VATS accuracy. After a quick check on Sean, the helpful TV man told us some nukes were on the way. And with that, I was out the door and down the road faster than you can say, "Where's Sean?" Despite my breakneck pace, I turned around to see my wife and kid just a few feet away. I sprinted off again, but as soon as I got near the elevator, they teleported once more. I looked away from the bombs like some sort of action movie hero, or maybe just to save my eyes from permanent damage. There wasn't much to do for the rest of the intro, so I hopped in the pod and waited for the cutscenes to play out. Once I was finally given control, it was a short trip through the vault to get back to the surface. A few rad roaches were in the way, but they were no match for, well, pretty much anything in the entire game. I dusted off an old Pip-Boy and took the elevator up to the surface. After the infamously long loading screen, I hopped on over to Sanctuary to meet Cogsworth. As the first test of my run, I had to try and take down Cogsworth if I wanted to talk to him. I unloaded my 10mm pistol on him to no avail before trying to whack him to death. Despite all the punishment, he instantly healed up to full after each hit. This is unlike all other killable NPCs in the game, who are usually able to be downed. Since my barrage of attacks fulfilled the rules of this run, I was now free to talk to him and pick up the first quest. We cleaned out Sanctuary, and he sent me off down the road to start my adventure. Dogmeat was waiting to greet me at the truck stop outside Sanctuary, but I couldn't even talk to a dog without breaking the rules. Now I'm just gonna gloss over this part because nothing happened between us at all. I think he ate some tomatoes or something here, don't even worry about it. But anyways, I was now free to talk to him, only to tell him off for now. I still needed him for a later story quest, so I couldn't just skip meeting him altogether. Next on my list was some cleanup duty in Concord. The raiders fell apart like tissue paper, providing no resistance on my path to the Minutemen. For a little more of a challenge, I now had to take out the remnants of the Minutemen. Preston, Sturgis, and the Longs all put up a good fight before getting knocked out. On the other hand, Mama Murphy didn't feel like falling down at 0 health, and instead assumed a fighting pose. Once they got back up, they really didn't feel like speaking with me. This was obviously a big problem, because the only way I could continue the story was by talking to Preston. I tried leaving the building and going back in, but they weren't quick to forget. So, as a last-ditch effort, I went back to Sanctuary and waited for days on end in an old ratty armchair. Upon my return, everyone seemed suspiciously happy to see me. Preston asked me to clear out Concord, which conveniently refilled with raiders despite being empty just seconds before. I went up to the roof, hopped in the power armor, grabbed the minigun, and shredded some raiders. A Deathclaw ran up and whacked me a few times, but the minigun made quick work of it. Preston thanked me for saving the day and asked me to meet him back at Sanctuary. Instead, I walked over to the Drumlin Diner where a confrontation was brewing. In a normal run, you'd try to solve this dispute for one party or the other, but I didn't have the time, much less the ability to even talk to them. Once everyone was out of my way, I ransacked the diner and took off into the sunset. Next I made my way down to Cambridge, grabbing a few levels and tons of loot along the way. At the Cambridge police station, I helped take down the waves of ghouls before quickly turning on the Brotherhood members I had just saved. There was no way I was listening to a lecture by edgy Buzz Lightyear, so I started up with the most difficult encounter of the run so far. We exchanged bullets and laser beams for minutes on end, him peeking out from buildings to take huge chunks of my health bar, and me hiding behind trees to heal up. After a long, nearly deadly fight, he fell to a charged shot from my laser musket. Surprisingly, he was dead for good, although he didn't have much of value on him. I had never tried killing him in past runs, since he's a major NPC in the Brotherhood storyline. I had just assumed this meant he was unkillable, but props to Bethesda for letting players permanently lock out all those quests. With one of the potential game endings now blocked off, I continued on towards Diamond City. I was feeling extra devious, so I engaged both the super mutants and the Diamond City guards outside the city. The guards put up a good fight, but they weren't ready for the classic walk up to an enemy and VATS shotgun their head move. After that, I got a little sidetracked. I didn't want to head straight into Diamond City because I knew there was a big fight waiting for me. So I spent a while clearing my way through downtown Boston and the surrounding areas, vacuuming up loot and XP from everything in sight. Once I felt a little more prepared, I went back to Sanctuary to make some progress on the story. I met with Preston and did a little bit of construction for Sturgis. With that out of the way, I made my way down to Diamond City, prepared for a huge fight. Instead of listening to Penny and the mayor bicker back and forth, I took them out both pretty easily. On the other hand, the guards at the gate were a much bigger threat, burning through a good bit of the supplies I had built up. Once everyone was down, I dipped around the corner and sat in a chair for 24 hours straight. I came back and everyone seemed to have cooled down pretty fast. That, or they all had the memory of a goldfish. I chatted with Piper and walked on over to Nick Valentine's office. Talking to Ellie was the next story requirement, but I couldn't ask her any questions just yet. I beamed her with a sneak attack from my sniper rifle, instantly knocking her down. Conveniently, she wasn't even hostile when she got up. Something about instant kills on unkillable NPCs can make them skip the hostile stage entirely. Just another wonky Fallout thing, but I wasn't complaining. She told me where to find Nick, and I was off to rescue him in record time. Skinny Malone and his gang of suspiciously noir-themed goons were standing between me and the good detective. Compared to the Diamond City guards, the mobsters were a pushover. I blasted my way through the vault effortlessly and met up with the man, or robot, himself. The game really wanted me to talk to him, preventing me from shooting and constantly bringing up the dialogue options whenever I looked away. I could only shoot at him with VATS, but he was constantly regenerating tons of health. So after lots of frustration, I got a few good shotgun rounds in to knock him down. He didn't seem to mind at all, quickly getting back up and initiating a conversation. I guess those older synth models were just built differently. Regardless, we were ready to roll. It was a long run out, but the resistance was minimal. Skinny Malone was waiting to meet us at the exit, along with Darla and a few more goons. They tried to talk to us to build some dramatic tension, but that just wasn't in the cards. A grenade and some pistol rounds made quick work of them, and we were on our way out. Back in Diamond City, Nick grilled me about Sean and the mysterious stranger who took him. Luckily for us, Kellogg had a house just around the corner from Nick's place. The door was locked, so I had to head up to the mayor's office to procure the key. I had already downed the mayor outside the city, so he was fair game for conversation. Although, he wasn't willing to help, saying he was far too busy or something. His busy day seemed to be just sitting in various chairs for hours on end, so I didn't blame him. Instead, I pickpocketed the key from him and went back down to meet Nick. Inside Kellogg's place, we found some cigars that we could use to track him down. For some reason, Dogmeat was waiting just outside, despite being at Sanctuary last I saw him. So he sniffed the cigars and took me off on a long, boring escort quest that Nick didn't feel like participating in. Good call on that one, Nick. We eventually made it to Fort Hagen, where Kellogg was hiding out with a bunch of old-school synths. I shredded through synths like Will Smith and iRobot, eventually making my way down to Kellogg's command room. Before he could talk to me, I blew him and his buddies to pieces, courtesy of a pile of explosives I had saved up. I snatched up his loot and the quest item and made my exit. Back in Diamond City, Nick and Piper had a little chat I didn't listen to before telling me to go to the memory den. I fast traveled to Park Street Station and walked just a block away before arriving at Good Neighbor. There were lots of people inside trying to offer me quests, but I ignored all of them on my way to the memory den. The next required chat was with Dr. Amari, meaning it was high time I started shooting again. This proved to be quite a challenge, because hitting her made not only Nick hostile, but all other Good Neighbor NPCs too. They all burst in the doors as soon as I started the fight, eventually overwhelming me with sheer numbers. I tried a few approaches, even attempting to run out of town after knocking out the doctor, but the hail of gunfire was just too much to handle. After a few tries, I decided to give the Ellie approach a shot. One sneak attack with the sniper knocked her out instantly, skipping her hostile trigger, thus preventing the swarm of angry townspeople. When she got up, she agreed to hook me up to the memory lounger like nothing had happened. Nick was upstairs, but he didn't seem to care either. I guess a gun going off indoors was just a normal occurrence for him. I took a few tips from speedrunners and sprinted through most of Kellogg's memories. Aside from the intro, this is probably everyone's least favorite part of replaying the game, so the faster the better. When it was finally over, I was given the quest to find Virgil in the glowing sea, so I started heading down there, blasting raiders, super mutants, and even a few vertibirds on my way. I wasn't really prepared with radiation gear or anything, so I chugged some Rad-X and started running through the irradiated zone. I ran or snuck by most of the angry creatures on the way before coming upon the Crater of Adam. I made sure to wipe out the whole clan because nobody actually likes them or their annoying radiation guns. Outside Virgil's cave, I ran into the token Deathclaw. Unfortunately for him, I had some jet and a combat shotgun ready for this moment. He didn't even get a single swing in. Inside the cave, I took out Virgil's turrets before turning on him. He put up a pretty good fight, having a lot more health than I expected, but still not enough to stop me. Since he was hostile whenever I let him get back up, I had to run out and fast travel away to wait it out. After a quick detour to Sanctuary, I went back and talked with the nerdiest super mutant in the land. He wanted me to take out an Institute courser before he would tell me how to get into the Institute itself. Easy enough, since I could just fast travel to the location where one was waiting. If I was playing survival or some other mode with fast travel disabled, then I would have thought twice about this quest. Inside Green Tech Genetics, I fought my way through hordes of weak gunner enemies while the game hinted at the dangers ahead. But despite the warnings, the courser didn't put up much of a fight. Just like Kellogg, a handful of explosives and a shotgun shell or two put him down rather quickly. Unluckily for his prisoners, the explosions turned them into piles of goo at some point in the battle. With the courser chip on hand, I went back to Dr. Amari to have it analyzed. She instead redirected me to the railroad to get the chip analyzed. Since a peaceful chat with the railroad was out of the picture, I walked in guns blazing. A couple grenades made quick work of Deacon, Desdemona, and the drummer boy. But Glory was a much bigger threat. She almost got me with her minigun, but Nerd Rage saved the day, letting me clean up in slow motion. Inside the Railroad HQ, the rest of the members went down pretty quickly. Tinker Tom was the last one standing, but not for long. Another VATS shotgun move took him out, although he continued talking despite being dead. I decided to take his hat for good measure. I mean, the stats on it aren't half bad. After nabbing all the goodies in sight, I used Tom's terminal to decode the courser chip. With that done, I went back to Virgil and learned how to build the teleporter. I already had all the materials on hand, so Sturgis helped me put it together, and I was inside the Institute in no time. I used his holotape to scan their network for later, and proceeded onwards to meet Sean's 1 and 2. Young Sean was behind some glass. Even if I could have gotten in, all the kids in Fallout are invincible anyways, so it wouldn't have affected the run. So once I was done talking to Sean, the other Sean, or should I say, father, came out to greet me. I guess he should have been watching me closer, because I did what I had done to everyone else in the Commonwealth. That is, greeted him with a shot to the face. I took his coat and scoured around for other things to do, but the game kinda just left me hanging. I guess they didn't expect me to end the encounter before we even talked, so there was no quest update like you'd expect. With nothing left for me in the Institute, I headed back to the teleporter room. Despite killing their leader in his office, there was only very minimal resistance on my way out. My next goal was taking down the Institute to end the game, but I couldn't convince Preston to storm the place until we had more help. This meant I had to do the one thing he always wanted me to, recruit more settlements. Although, I couldn't actually talk to any of the settlers in these places to do their quests. A few settlements were empty, only requiring me to clear them out to take over. But the ones with people in them always ended up the same way. Preston tells me to help out some people, I have no choice but to wipe them out, and then I have to report the bad news back to him. You'd think he'd figure out how bad I was for the Minutemen after a while, but he never did. So I repeated this countless times over, eventually claiming almost every settlement on the map. But I still couldn't get him to trigger the quest to retake the castle in South Boston. Looking online, everyone said you only needed either 4 or 8 settlements to get it to happen. But I had way more than that. Although, most of those settlements were acquired by taking them from the former owners. So I hadn't been able to complete many of Preston's quests at all. He eventually started sending me out to settlements I had already cleared, where I just repeated the process. I was stuck in what seemed to be an endless loop, starting to doubt if this run was even possible at all, so I decided to change things up a bit. Sure, I couldn't complete any of the quests involving NPCs, but I could set up radio beacons in the now empty settlements. After doing this a few times, I went back to Preston and he offered me the quest. I don't know if this means that you need a radio beacon to claim a settlement, or if you need a certain number of settlers across the Commonwealth to progress. But whatever, it was only really an issue in the rules of this run, so I didn't have to worry about it anymore. With the quest finally started, me and the boys cleaned out the castle before I promptly got smacked by the Mirelurk Queen. After a quick reload and a not so quick second round in the castle, I laid down all the mines I had, tenderizing the big crab to perfection. Even though we took the castle, Preston still didn't want to give me the next quest in the main storyline, so I had to wait a few days for Ronnie Shaw to show up and move things along. An insta-kill with the sniper fulfilled the rules of this run, allowing me to talk to Ronnie for a request. We delved into the dungeons underneath the castle, almost dying to an angry security guard robot, but Nerd Rage saved me yet again. The slow time mechanics from that perk and all the jet cams are pretty overpowered. What the game doesn't tell you is that it actually slows time more for enemies than it does for you, which makes even the most difficult enemies a walk in the park. Anyways, with Ronnie's quest completed, Preston finally gave me the task of defending the castle from the Institute. I didn't have nearly enough ammo for this fight, so I had to use my wet noodle of a sword half the time. This resulted in a very long and drawn out battle, but I eventually clawed my way to victory. With the Minutemen storyline wrapping up, the only thing left was the final assault on the Institute. I trudged through some sewers full of ghouls, rats, and synths all alone because the Minutemen couldn't bother to help. Upon finally reaching the Institute, I opened up the portal for Preston and the gang to join the party. We blasted our way through some high-tech labs, dingy old offices, and even fought a gorilla or two on the way to the main reactor. Inside the reactor, I took quite a few missiles to the face, surviving by just a hair a couple of times. It was a tough fight, but at least Preston worked as a useful target dummy when he wasn't on the ground. I planted the fusion charge in the reactor, and we were instantly teleported back to the entrance. I don't know why we couldn't just teleport to the reactor in the first place, but this was not the time for explanations. Evil doppelganger Sean asked me to take him with us, which I promptly ignored. The remaining Minutemen and I teleported out to a convenient vantage point at the top of the city. Preston gave me the word, and I hit the detonator, blowing the Institute, and presumably Robo-Sean, to dust. The game wrapped up with a nice cutscene and that famous line everyone knows from the trailer. So, back to that question I asked myself a few weeks ago. Can you beat Fallout 4 if you shoot first and ask questions later? The answer, quite simply, is yes. It's not easy, and it's clearly not intended by the developers. But you can still beat the game despite being possibly the worst person in the Commonwealth. You can't get the Institute, Railroad, or Brotherhood endings because all of their NPCs are killable. But good old Preston just can't stay down. Nobody ever said he wasn't persistent. Like I said before, Fallout 4 is a personal favorite of mine, so getting to go through it in a new way was lots of fun. As a straightforward playthrough down the main storyline, it was pretty interesting, but obviously the rules of this run make almost all side quests and lots of other activities impossible. It was a fun one-off, but I wouldn't replay it with the same rules. If you have any ideas for interesting runs in Fallout, or just about any other game, feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you're interested in more, I've done a handful of different challenge runs, plus all sorts of other long-form videos on my channel. Anyways, that's about all I have to say for now. Thanks for sticking out until the end, folks, and I'll see you all in the next one.
You're not Sean! You're not Sean! You're a robot. Made to think you're real.
You're just gonna leave me here? I can't believe it! I hate you!
I knew you could do it.